In short, the School Food Trust is to get children at school to eat healthily. But it's not as easy as that. You can't just put good food in front of children and expect them to eat it, because they won't. So we have to do a lot of work on the children, persuading them to give it a try and encouraging them by teaching them to cook and teaching them about school and so forth. And we have to do a job on the most important job is to make sure that the head teacher understands that this is something really important, and that if they get their children eating healthily, they'll probably perform better, and that'll help the league tables. So getting the teachers on board and trying to get food into the curriculum. Fortunately, the government has now said that children must learn to cook at school in the secondary curriculum, so that's good. And then we have to do work on parents, because otherwise parents can undermine the whole thing. And we've all got those images in our heads of parents putting burgers through the bars of the school gates. Well, I'm glad to say that doesn't happen very often, but if parents don't understand what you're trying to do and their children come home and say, "Mum, it's disgusting, I hate it, I don't want it," parents naturally think, "Oh my goodness, my children are going to have nothing to eat." And so let them take to school what they want. And unfortunately, we know that school lunchboxes, although of course there are exceptions, but by and large school lunchboxes are much unhealthier than the school dinners, which now, since the law changed, have to be healthy by law. They're all nutritionally balanced and good for you. And then also, of course, we have to work with the local authorities and with bursars and governors and so on. Anybody who can help us make children eat good dinners. Well, we know they don't we? I mean, you only have to look at them, a lot of them, to know they don't eat healthily. And I think the reasons they don't is because their parents were not taught anything about food, and a lot of them were not taught to cook. There isn't any time for cooking at home, so the family meal, or at least parents think there's no time, although I'd like to come back to that because I think there should be. So family meals have gone slightly out of the window. There's a snacking culture which is hugely encouraged by the manufacturers, who of course have endless money at their fingertips to spend on marketing to children. And fortunately we've managed by lobbying and whatnot to get some advertising to children banned, but it's only before the watershed, and of course most children are still watching telly at 9 o'clock at night, so that's not much help. We need less advertising to children. I would actually, if I was the not just the food czar, but the czar, I would ban advertising to children at all, because I think parents are under so much pressure from children to buy, branded trainers and baseball caps, and everything has to have a brand on it. Everything has to be incredibly expensive. And it's all very well saying, why did the parents just say no? But the truth is that parents have lost it. Largely children rule. And I've seen parents who have been living on toast in poor estates so that their children can go to school in Nike trainers and not be bullied. Because nobody wants their children bullied, and children can be bullied at school just because they've got the wrong brand on their feet. It's ridiculous, but that's where we've got to. I don't think I'd be quite as gloomy as that, because I think this is perfectly fixable. We've seen that in primary schools, with the help of parents and teachers who care, we are getting more children to eat school dinners. And it's not that difficult. To be honest, little children are very willing to be led, and they actually want to please. They want to please their teachers, they want to please their parents. So if the parents and teachers will encourage them to eat good food, they will do it. I mean, of course it takes effort. And, we now know that most foods are an acquired taste, so that it's no good giving a child a piece of broccoli and leaving it at that, because the child won't like it. You have to have... There's a bit of research on this, and I can't remember the words. I mean, I can't remember the figures exactly, but it's something like 9 2-ounce portions of broccoli, and you love it. 5 2-ounce portions of carrot, and you love it. 4 2-ounce portions of peas, and you love it. And those are all to do with the sugar levels in these things. And so as breeding makes vegetables sweeter, it's easier to make children like it. I mean, spinach now is quite easy to make children like. It used to be quite bitter. But anyway, so children have to be persuaded to eat, and little ones are easy to persuade. The difficulty is in secondary schools, because ever since schools have, not all of them, but some schools have relied heavily on vending and snacks and selling this junk to children in order to make money to, say, run the minibus or buy books for the library or discs for the computers. I mean, perfectly noble ambitions, but by a bad means, by selling rubbish to children. And since that's all gone now, because you're no longer allowed to do it by law, secondary schools really suffer from a drop in numbers of children eating the school dinners. They still have a cafeteria selection, which means the children mostly eat what they know. They might eat a baked potato over and over again, which of course is not a healthy diet. So there's a lot more work to be done on secondary school children. You need to get a little task force together which sets a school food policy, which covers everything. The teaching of food in school, so that children get taught in nutrition, in science, in PSHE, social and, all that stuff, citizenship and everything. That they get taught to cook, that they get, if possible, I mean, not all schools can do this, but that if they can grow food or go and visit farms, as soon as children become interested in food, they're more likely to care about what goes in their bodies. So you set a policy which covers the teaching, the service, what standards you expect the food to be, how the food will be served and so forth. And that is agreed not just by the teachers, but by the children, usually the school council, by a group of parents and, probably a committee of about a dozen people with teachers, caterers, parents, children. And that little group can push things. And then the next thing to do is to make sure that the dining room is a nice place to be. We ask a lot of children why they don't have school dinners. And one answer is we don't like the food, or we don't think we're going to like the food. But more often the answer is, well, it's horrible. I mean, I don't want to spend my whole lunch hour queuing. It's too noisy, it's shabby, they don't treat you well. I mean, you queue up for 20 minutes to have a horrible time, why would I do that? Nobody thinks of the children as customers. And the real attitude change is when schools start asking children what they like. And guess what? Children don't want to poison themselves. They want help in eating healthily. And as long as they're getting the right teaching, they will very quickly start holding their caterer to account and saying there are not enough salads, there's not enough fruit, we want more. It's amazing. I mean, I was astonished at this because I thought it was all going to have to be top down. But actually the children are a terrific resource if you involve them. And then, they have to, the food has to be delicious. I mean, at the moment, by law, it has to be nutritious, but there's nothing to say that the cook has to cook it well. And so one of the things the School Food Trust does is works very hard to raise the status of cooks so that instead of just coming in the back door, being the sort of Cinderella of the hospitality industry, creeping in the back door, cooking the food, slaving away, and never seeing the head teacher except when she comes in and says, can you cut some 20% off the budget? And then going out the back door. They must be involved in the school. And when that starts to happen, they can be the best marketing because they can say, hey, Lucy, that's the third baked potato you've had this week. Don't you think you should try something else? And if you have cashless systems, you can actually tell what the children have eaten, and say, high time you ate something else, or no, you can't have another piece of pizza, you had pizza yesterday. If you really want to do this thing quickly, the answer is a no-choice menu. You couldn't do a no-choice menu overnight because you'd probably have a riot if the school were used to lots of. But if you, at a moment in time, if you change the dining room, for example, build a new dining room, or you radically change it, or you prepare the children, like you say in one term, look, from next term for all these following reasons, and get them to agree that it'll be worth having a go at a sit-down lunchtime menu, if you've got the space to do it. then it's really worth doing it. And there are a couple of schools. I mean, there's the two that I mentioned before, where there are two schools in Hackney, which are both new schools, academies, and they have simply decided that they cannot afford to have a cafeteria system because, A, the children will eat what they know they like, so they're not going to have them healthy enough, even if what's on there is healthy, that they need to give them a hot, proper meal, and they want them to perform better and their brains to work better and so forth. But most of all, or as importantly for the school, they want the catering service to be viable. And if you have an enormous choice, you waste a lot of food and you need a lot of cooks to cook it and so forth. And with costs of fuel and food and wages all going up, you need to be as economic as possible. So the best way to do it is to have, just like you'd have at home, a 2-course meal, no choice other than a vegetarian option. And that's it. But you change it every day. And if you change the menu every day, children get to eat a whole lot of different things. Whereas if you have every day there's baked potatoes and pizza and one hot dish and a salad and lots of different sandwiches, then children are going to eat the same thing every day. Well, when you're in my care, which is what you are when you're at school, I don't want you to have anything that is bad for you. I wouldn't like you to learn maths that wasn't correct. I wouldn't like you to learn that 2 and 2 made 17. So I'm not going to let you have something which is actually physically harmful for you. Of course you can have the occasional treat at home and occasionally, but you shouldn't have it at school. And I would, if your mother really lets you eat, McDonald's and McNuggets and Kentucky Fried Chicken every night, then I'd like a word with her, because I'm sure she does not want to undermine the good work that we're doing in school. I'm sure she would like you to grow up healthy. And if she's letting you eat all that thing, either you're bullying her a bit, which you shouldn't because it's bad for you, or she just doesn't understand. So I'd like to explain it to her. First of all, if you eat the same thing every day, no diet is healthy. I mean, even steak and salad every day is not good for you. It would be too much protein. I don't know where you're getting your hamburgers, so maybe I might be misjudging some of these chains, but I do know one very well-known burger chain whose salad burger actually has more calories in it than a meat burger, because it has so much mayonnaise in it. And so, by and large, the big commercial companies, whether they're chocolate companies or burger companies or chicken companies, they're there to take your money. And of course, if they can make the food taste attractive, look marvelous, it's nicely packaged and advertise it very strongly, but they're not there to give you a healthy diet. That's not their aim and object. I think peer pressure is the great underestimated tool that we have. For example, if children in a primary school, which is the easiest one to get children to all eat healthily, if a child arrives in a primary school and everybody is sitting down and eating, knife and fork lunch, the new arrival might never have held a knife and fork before, might have been fed at home with nothing but handheld junk. But the minute they get into that environment where everybody else, all their peers, all their friends, are eating, let's say, ham and salad or shepherd's pie and vegetables, they will learn to eat it, because they don't want... Children are tremendously conservative. They want to do what everybody else is doing. So it's brilliant. But the reverse of that is a real thing that worries me almost more than anything, and that is that you can get a primary school which will have the whole school eating healthily by the time they're in year 6. They go into big school in year 7, and they will meet a whole lot of people who are just a bit older than them in the dining room, and they will all be eating handheld sandwiches and stuff. Now they can't be eating junk because it's not allowed anymore. But they can be mocked because they're prepared to eat cabbage or because they want to sit down and eat with a knife and fork, and they'll give it up in seconds. They will just abandon 5 years or 6 years of good food education in a week, which is horrible. Finland is extraordinary. They're a tiny country, and they're quite an old-fashioned country, so I think it's been easier for them than it will be for us. But there are terrific lessons to be learned. I mean, what they did 15 years ago, they had a huge heart attack, stroke, diabetes rate, and a big obesity problem, because they have a lot of dairy and reindeer and meat and goodness knows what up there. It's cold, I suppose, so they have a tradition of eating for a cold climate, but now they all live in centrally heated houses. They don't need that diet anymore. So the government decided they better do something about it. And what they decided was that they would tackle it through school dinners. And they simply, first of all, they made the dinner hour a lesson, so that everything the children eat is nutritionally balanced, and there's no choice, or very little choice. There might be a salad bar and vegetarian option. But what is being eaten in the dining room is also being taught in the classroom, so that there's a real, if they've got an Italian day going on, Italian week going on, they will have Italian food in the dining room, and they'll have lessons in geography and history and stuff a bit about Italy. And the children help themselves to this food, so they are very involved with the serving and with clearing up, and they also all work with the caterers for a week for work experience during their school time. So they get to know what's going on in the kitchen, to trust it, and to understand the process and everything. And they also have to eat what is expected. I don't suppose they get sent to jail if they don't do it, but it is expected that although they can take as little or as much as they like, they're expected to eat it. And so there's no waste. There's no waste, partly because there's no choice, so the caterer doesn't have to make too much of anything, and they eat it all. And then the kitchen is interesting, because the kitchens are generally smaller than ours, because they have the state-of-the-art kit. They have wonderful things called combi ovens, which some of our schools have one small one, but they have just banks of these things, and they are ovens that can steam or boil or roast or shallow fry or bake. And you can cook in batches, so that food is cooked for about 20 or 30 people at a time, which go in a continual rotation, if you like, so that every child, as it comes down the usually 4 lines, in a big school, 4 lines identical, of cafeteria selection, so that they can feed themselves with freshly cooked food. It's not been sitting in a hot cupboard for half the morning. And they have these big tilting kettles, which are jacketed, that you can stir fry in, for example. When we do stir fries at a school, we've got some poor lady stirring, 3 or 4 of them, all stirring a big wok. Well, that's so hard on labour. If you have a big kettle that automatically tilts and stirs, you just put all the ingredients in and forget about it for 5 minutes, and then when it's done, that's a 30-portion lot, and then you put another lot in, and another 30-portion. So I reckon that in Finland you could have 4 or 5 caterers serving 1,000 people, whereas we would have anything up to 15, probably 10. So, you can save some money as well as give them good food. I'm glad to say that there is finally some good research coming out that shows that concentration and behaviour are hugely helped by a good diet. And that is really important, because otherwise why would teachers bother? They are all so driven by league tables, which they have to be. It's their sales tool. That they have to have good performance. And fortunately, I've just been in a school that the children who they're on free school meals. Now that means they're the poorest children in society, because they qualify for free school meals. Those children actually do better, 8% better overall in their SATs test, than children who don't take free school meals. it's very interesting. There's a scientist called Bernard Gesch who's done a lot of work in prisons with young offenders. And he's found that if you bring prisoners, who are of course trapped by their nature, so you do a very good double-blind test. And he took, in 3 institutions, he took half the young offenders and gave them placebos, and half the young offenders, they had their diet supplemented with pills to bring it to a nutritionally good diet. And the ones who had had the supplements, their behavior improved by 30%, and that was measured by violence that was punishable. So that didn't mean just being a bit rude to a screw. It meant something for which they would be disciplined, lose privileges or get, something or other. And that was repeated 3 times in prisons, and it's now been done with toddler groups and small children, and measuring smiling and laughing and whinging and crying. Exactly the same results, round about 30% improvement in behaviour. And the other thing that's interesting is that additives, E numbers, parents and teachers for long have suspected that these things have some effect on children's behaviour and makes their attention wander, and that they become hyperactive. And the interesting thing is that scientists have finally agreed with mums and teachers. Not about all additives, because of course vitamin C is an additive, there are good additives and bad additives. But there are some colorants particularly which affect behaviour. We do allow some small amounts of some additives. In a chocolate drink, for example, we do allow some artificial sugar, but very, very little. And of course, it's very difficult, because then we get other manufacturers jumping up and say, why can't we have some sweetener in something else? And we have to just say, because it's more important that children drink milk, and some children won't drink straight raw milk, so we want it to be flavoured with a bit of cocoa. As soon as you put cocoa in, you have to put a little bit of sugar in. The tiny proportions. We say 5% of the drink should be, whether it's natural orange juice or anything, there shouldn't be more than 5% of sugar in it. Well, we don't touch preschool children. We don't touch children in prisons. We don't touch children in care or children in hospitals. And in a way, all these children need us more, almost, than school children. But the thrust is school children, and that's what we're paid for, and without a lot more money and more staff we couldn't do more. But it does worry me about, we are looking at how we can possibly help preschool children, because we do know that the habits of eating are formed very, very young, and so although it's easier to change primary school children than secondary school children, it would be much easier to change primary school children if we'd started it, if parents fed them the right things from 4 months old. I would have thought just as much, and not just for children. I think hospital food is by and large a disgrace. No, I wouldn't, unfortunately. The truth of the matter is that we've only been at this job for a couple of years, and it started with Jamie Oliver waking up the government to the fact that something needed to be done with his television programmes. But unfortunately, he also woke up all the parents to the fact that there might be really bad food in their schools. So it got the government changing the law so that food has to be healthy in schools. It also got parents withdrawing their children from school meals in droves. And so we had a huge drop. Some, figures vary, but about 15% drop of children, especially in secondary school. And we've now got to catch that up again, and it is beginning to go up. But it's a long haul, you've got to get a lot of hearts and minds, and you've got to get money. If children aren't eating in secondary schools because they don't like the dining rooms and they don't like the queuing, that takes physical money to change. And so, some schools have staggered the school day, which is quite a useful way of doing it. And I must say, one of the encouraging things about the School Food Trust is that I've not yet heard a problem that a school has. They come to us and say, we can't do it because, which some other school hasn't already cracked. You know, they'll stagger a day so that only one year group comes out at once. That means that if they only have 120 seats in the dining room, they can still all sit down and eat with a knife and fork. But it means that some children have to eat lunch at 11 o'clock and some have to eat it at 2 o'clock. But that's fine. Children very quickly get used to that. And it works brilliantly. And then other teachers say to me, oh, it can never be done. How would we manage? And we just send them off to a school that's already done it. And they, oh, that sounds done. Because teachers will believe other teachers when they won't believe me. Much better than packed meals, much better than no meals, much better than the meals that they used to be, and they're getting better all the time. And my main message is, look on the School Food Trust. There's a massive help for schools, or for parents, or for head teachers, or for caterers. We really do try to help anybody who can help us. Yes, we have. We've just done this, and it's got quite a lot of towns very, very cross. But there are towns where there are 40 junk outlets, by which I mean, a chippy in a mobile burger, a mobile burger van or ice cream van or a burger bar or a chicken, KFC or whatever. We counted all of the outlets in local authorities, and we've sort of named the local authorities who allow the most, and some of them have 40 or 45, I think is the most, outlets per school. Well, that's quite hard for a head. It's not surprising that heads who are already struggling with not decent dining rooms and not enough kitchen space, it's tempting to just open the gates and hope somebody else will feed these children. But parents, we've surveyed parents, and parents overwhelmingly want children to stay on school. They don't want them roaming around the streets. They think it's not safe. They know that they're tempted. But then, of course, they go and give them £8.40 for pocket money per child. That was 2 years ago, that survey. £8.40 a child, pocket money. And so, of course, there's a real danger that even if their dinner money is put on a smart card, but they've got a lot of pocket money, they will go and spend it on stuff on the way to school. 40% of children buy a chocolate bar and a fizzy drink on the way to school by way of breakfast, which is not a good breakfast. Yes, it's quite difficult to do, but it is really worth doing. You do not want children to die at an earlier age than you're going to die. You don't want them to be handicapped because they haven't done well at school, and you want them to have a happy life. And frankly, obese children do not have a happy life. Well, the scale of the problem is really scary. I mean, we now have 35% of obese children, which is roughly what Finland had 15 years ago. Today, Finland has 2% obese children. So it can be done, and we need everybody to help us do it. It really matters. Let's do it.